The mining outpost called Redhaven 3 was a lonely place. It was not the kind of world where people came for beauty. It had no green forests, no blue oceans, and no birds singing in the morning. It was a world of red dust, dark skies, and machines that dug deep into the frozen ground for minerals. The wind always carried a sharp, dry chill that could cut through even the thickest coat. Jornvale had lived here for many years. He was not young anymore, but not yet old enough to stop working. His hair was starting to turn gray at the edges, and his hands were always stained with the black marks of oil and engine grease. He had once worked on big starships, but those days were behind him now. These days, he repaired small machines, delivery drones, power tools, mining bots. It was quiet work, and Jorn liked quiet. His home was a small metal cabin at the far edge of the outpost. The cabin was warm inside because he kept a small heating unit running all the time. Outside his door, the ground was covered with thin ice, and the air smelled faintly of iron from the mines. Life was simple, sometimes too simple. That night, the power in part of the outpost went out. Jorn could see the lights in the distance flicker and then fade. The public heating vents stopped blowing steam into the streets. Without the heat, the temperature would drop fast. People would stay inside if they could. But as Jorn stepped outside to check one of his repair drones, he saw something in the alley between two storage buildings. At first, he thought it was just a shadow moving, but then he heard a faint cough, followed by a small, shaky voice. He walked closer. Two small figures were huddled together near the wall, their knees pulled up to their chests. One of them was trying to wrap an old blanket around both of them, but the blanket was too thin to keep out the cold. Their faces were pale, and their lips had a blue tinge from the freezing air. Jorn crouched down in front of them. They were girls maybe 9 or 10 years old. Their clothes were torn and dusty, and their shoes were worn almost to nothing. The older one looked up at him, her eyes sharp but tired. The younger one hid her face against the other's shoulder. "What are you doing out here?" Jorn asked softly. The older girl hesitated. "We don't have a place." The shelter was full. Jorn knew the shelter she meant. It was just 3 rooms with thin mats on the floor. When the power went out, people would crowd there for warmth. If it was full, that meant they had been turned away into the freezing streets. "Come on," he said, standing and holding out his hand. The older girl studied him for a moment. Her eyes said she was used to not trusting strangers. But the wind picked up again, and she must have decided that a stranger's cabin was better than the cold street. She took his hand, helping the younger girl to her feet. They followed him across the narrow path to his cabin. Once inside, the warm air made them both sigh in relief. Jorn closed the door quickly to keep the heat in. The younger girl looked around with wide eyes. The cabin was small, just one main room with a bed, a workbench, and a small cooking unit. Shelves lined the walls, filled with tools, spare parts, and a few jars of dried food. "Sit there," Jorn said, pointing to the small table. The girls sat down quietly, their hands still holding the blanket tightly. Jorn noticed their fingers were red and stiff from the cold. He turned on the cooking unit and opened a small container of soup mix. It wasn't much, just dried vegetables and a few strips of protein, but when mixed with hot water, it made a warm, filling meal. As the smell filled the cabin, the younger girl peeked over the table, her eyes following every move. "What are your names?" Jorn asked as he stirred the soup. "I'm Kayla," the older girl said. "This is Suri. Where are your parents?" Kayla's eyes lowered. "They left a long time ago. We've been moving from place to place." Jorn didn't ask more. He had met many people on Redhaven 3 who had no one left. The outpost didn't give much to those who were alone. When the soup was ready, Jorn poured it into 2 bowls and set them on the table. The steam rose in soft white curls, and the smell was rich compared to the cold air outside. "Eat slowly," he said, sitting across from them. Suri's small hands wrapped around the bowl like it was a treasure. She took her first spoonful and let out a tiny sound of happiness. Kayla ate more carefully, still watching Jorn as if she was making sure this wasn't some trick. Jorn didn't mind. He ate a little himself, but most of the food was for them outside. The wind howled against the walls, but inside, the warmth of the heater and the quiet sound of spoons tapping bowls made the room feel safe. After they finished, Jordan gave them each a cup of hot tea. It wasn't real tea, it was made from dried herbs he grew in a small hydroponic box, but it was warm and sweet. You can rest here tonight, he told them. I've only got one heated blanket, but it's big enough for both of you. Kayla opened her mouth like she might refuse, but Suri was already nodding, her eyes heavy with sleep. Jordan spread the blanket on the bed and let them climb under it. Suri curled up right away. Kayla stayed awake a little longer, watching Jordan as he sat back at his workbench. Why are you helping us? She asked quietly. Jordan looked at her. For a moment, because someone helped me once when I needed it, he said simply. Kayla didn't say anything, but after a moment, she lay down next to her sister. The cabin grew quiet except for the faint hum of the heater. Jordan kept working on a broken drone, but his eyes kept drifting to the sleeping forms on his bed. It had been a long time since anyone else had been in this room. When morning came, the storm had passed, and the streets outside were silent. Jordan got up early to check the mine's power grid. When he returned, the bed was empty. The girls were gone. On the workbench, beside his tools, lay a single coin. It was not like the normal credits people used. It was silver, with tiny, delicate patterns carved into its surface, patterns so small they looked like they might be moving. If you stared too long, Jordan picked it up, turning it over in his hand. He didn't know why they had left it, but somehow, it felt heavy with meaning. He placed it on a shelf above his bench. The cabin felt a little emptier without the girls, but he hoped, wherever they were, they had found somewhere warm. What Jordan didn't know was that this simple night, this one warm meal, would be remembered for years to come. 10 years passed on Redhaven 3. The outpost changed in some ways. New mining towers rose on the edge of the settlement. A few traders built better shops, but in other ways, it stayed exactly the same. The red dust still covered everything. The cold wind still whistled through the narrow alleys, and life was still a slow, steady grind for most people. Jordan Vale stayed in his small metal cabin at the far edge of the outpost. He was older now, his hair more gray than black, and his hands showed more lines from years of work. But his workbench was still full of the same scattered tools, small machines, and wires. Every morning, he would brew a cup of bitter drink from ground seeds and sit at his bench, ready to fix whatever came his way. Over the years, people had brought him all kinds of things: a mining bot with frozen joints, a water purifier that refused to run, a delivery drone missing one rotor. Jordan could fix almost anything mechanical, and that made him useful. But being useful did not mean being rich. He lived simply, with only what he needed. On a small shelf above his bench sat the silver coin. It had not moved from the spot he placed it 10 years ago. In the morning light, it still shone with that strange, soft glow. The carved patterns still seemed to shift ever so slightly if you stared at them for too long. Jordan had never been able to identify it. He had shown it once to a trader from the core worlds, but the man only shook his head and said, "Never seen metal work like that." To Jordan, it was just a reminder of a night when two young strangers had needed help, and he had given it. Without question, he had no idea what became of Kayla and Suri. Sometimes, when the wind outside howled and the heater hummed softly, he would find himself wondering if they were still alive. The galaxy was a hard place for children with no one to care for them. He told himself that maybe they had found a better place, a safer world. Maybe they had grown up and forgotten about the old mechanic on Redhaven 3. That was fine. He didn't help them for thanks. He helped them because it was the right thing to do. One cold evening, Jordan was finishing repairs on a broken atmospheric sensor for the mining authority. The sky outside was dark, with the faint red glow of the planets. Moons. The heater gave the room a steady warmth, but there was still a chill in the air. A knock came at the door. It was unusual. Most people called through the small comm before visiting. Jordan opened the door to find Merrick, one of the outpost supply clerks, standing there with a box in his hands. "Brought those parts you asked for," Merrick said. handing over the box. Inside were spare wires, replacement bolts, and a few circuit boards. Jordan thanked him and was about to close the door when Merrick glanced at the shelf and saw the coin. "You still have that thing?" Merrick asked. Jordan nodded. "Yeah, been there a while." Merrick leaned closer, squinting at it. "Looks valuable. You should sell it to one of the traders from the core worlds next time they come." "I've had offers," Jordan replied, "but it's not for sale." Merrick gave a small shrug. "Your choice. Just saying you could get enough credits to move off this rock." But Jordan didn't want to move. Red Haven 3 might be rough and cold, but it was home. He knew every street, every noise, every fault in the power grid. He'd rather live here with his tools and memories than chase some unknown life in the core. Worlds. The years continued their slow rhythm. Jordan worked, repaired, traded for food, and kept to himself. Sometimes, a young miner or new arrival would stop by and ask him questions about engines or wiring, and he would teach them a few tricks. He never asked for payment for that kind of help. Knowledge, like kindness, was worth sharing. One day, a small freighter from a distant system landed at the outpost. Its captain brought in a strange device for repair, a handheld scanner, with parts Jordan had never seen before. As he worked on it, he caught a glimpse of its inner circuits. They were far more advanced than anything on Red Haven 3. "This is from the Alliance core fleets." Jordan thought to himself. Someone important must have used this. He fixed it in less than an hour, and the captain was impressed. Not many mechanics could even open this without breaking it. The man said, "You ever think about working for the fleets?" Jordan smiled faintly. "Long time ago, I did. But my days for star travel are over." Still, the thought lingered. What would it be like to see the great capitalist ships again? To feel the hum of a warp engine under his feet? To walk the wide halls of a vessel that carried thousands of crew? He shook the thought away. Those days were for younger people. One night, during a heavy dust storm, the power grid failed in the eastern quarter of the outpost. Jordan was called to help repair the relay station. It was hard work in the freezing wind, but they got the lights and heat back on before morning. When he returned to his cabin, the coin caught his eye again. It sat quietly on the shelf, but something about it seemed different. He leaned closer and saw a faint glow in the carved patterns, like light moving through hidden channels. He touched it carefully. The glow faded, and it felt like ordinary metal. Again, Jordan frowned. He told himself it was just the light playing tricks after the storm. But a small part of him wondered if it meant something more. 10 years was a long time. The girls would be grown women now, if they were still alive. They might be on some distant world, living lives far from this cold mining rock. Jordan doubted he would ever see them again, and yet, every so often, he would look at the coin and feel a strange sense that the story was not over, as if the silver token was quietly waiting for something, waiting for a day he could not yet see. Jordan didn't know it, but that day was closer than he imagined, and when it came, it would arrive not on foot, nor in a miner's transport, but in the form of something no one on Red Haven 3 had ever seen before. Something that would change his life forever. The sun on Red Haven 3 was weak and far away. It gave no real warmth, only a pale, reddish light that barely touched the frozen ground. That morning, Jordan Vale was repairing a damaged water pump for the hydroponic station. The steady sound of tools clicking against metal filled his small cabin. Outside, the wind whispered across the empty street. It was an ordinary day until the air changed. At first, Jordan felt it in the floor, a faint vibration, soft but steady, like the deep hum of an engine far away. He paused, listening. The sound grew louder, and the vibration stronger, making small screws roll across his workbench. Storm coming, he wondered, but the hum didn't sound like wind. It was controlled, mechanical to smooth for nature. Then he heard it, the low, rising roar of powerful thrusters cutting through the thin air. Jordan stood, moving to the narrow window that looked out toward the open ground beyond the outpost. At first, he thought it might be a mining transport or a freighter making an emergency landing. But what came through the low clouds was nothing. Like the rough, patched ships that visited Red Haven 3. It was sleek, It was bright. It was impossibly beautiful. A massive starship descended slowly toward the ground, its pearl-white hull catching what little light the weak sun could give. Golden lines ran along its surface, glowing softly like threads of light woven into the metal. Its engines were almost silent now, a soft hum that carried more power than any mining craft could dream of. The air shimmered around it from the energy fields. Jordan had worked on ships all his life. He had seen the fast couriers of the trade guilds, the heavy battleships of the fleet, even a few experimental designs in his youth. But this ship, this was beyond anything he had ever seen. It wasn't just advanced, it was perfect. It lowered itself to the ground with a gentle precision, kicking up only a faint swirl of red dust. Every movement of its landing struts was smooth, like a living thing choosing where to rest. The people of the outpost noticed. A few miners and traders stepped out of their homes, shading their eyes to look. A ship like this didn't belong here. In truth, it didn't belong anywhere outside the highest worlds of the United Stellar Alliance. The hull bore a symbol Jordan didn't recognize, a star wrapped in a silver circle, surrounded by tiny patterns that reminded him of the strange coin on his shelf. The ship's ramp extended with a soft hiss. Two figures appeared at the top. At first, the bright light from the ship made it hard to see them clearly. But as they stepped down, Jordan's breath caught in his throat. They were tall, wearing finely cut uniforms of deep blue trim with silver. Their boots shone, their movements confident and precise. One of them carried a small, polished case. The other wore a short cloak over her shoulders, the kind given only to high-ranking officers or dignitaries. And then he saw their faces. The older one, not older now, but grown, had sharp, intelligent eyes that locked onto his cabin with certainty. The younger one, her features softer, but no less confident, looked around the outpost with quiet curiosity. Their hair was cleaner, their clothes perfect, their posture strong. But Jordan knew those faces. It was Kayla and Suri. 10 years had passed, but the memory of two shivering girls in a cold alley came back in an instant. He had thought he might never see them again. Now they were here, stepping down the ramp of a ship that looked like it belonged to the leaders of worlds. Jordan stayed still, his mind trying to make sense of it. The two women crossed the dusty ground toward him. People watched from doorways and windows, whispering to each other. No one in Redhaven 3 had ever received visitors like this. When Kayla reached him, she stopped just a step away. Her eyes softened, and for a moment, the confident officer seemed to disappear. "Hello, Jordan," she said. Her voice was deeper now, but it carried the same tone he remembered. "You remember me?" Jordan asked quietly. Suri stepped forward, smiling. "How could we forget? You gave us the first warm meal we've had in weeks. You gave us a place to rest when no one else would." Jordan shook his head slightly. "That was a long time ago." Kayla nodded. 10 years. "And we've spent those 10 years looking for you." Jordan frowned. "Looking for me? Why?" Suri opened the polished case she was carrying. Inside, resting on a dark cloth, was another coin identical to the one on Jordan's shelf. Its carved patterns glowed faintly, just like his had after that storm years ago. "That coin you kept," Kayla said. "It wasn't just money. It was an identity marker from a research vessel belonging to the United Stellar Alliance. When we left it with you, we didn't know you'd keep it all this time, but because you did, we could track it once we had the means." Jordan glanced back toward his cabin. "So that's what it is." Kayla stepped closer. "When we left you that night, we were taken in by the crew of that vessel. They gave us food, shelter, and an education. We worked harder than we thought possible. We learned technology, science, navigation, everything we could. Now, we are part of the Alliance Exploration Command," Suri added, "and none of that would have happened if you hadn't helped us when we were nothing but cold, hungry kids." Jordan didn't know what to say. He had fixed broken machines, but he never thought a simple act could fix the course of two lives. The silence stretched for a moment. Then Kayla gestured toward the ship. "We didn't come here just to say thank you. We came to give you something in return." Jordan raised an eyebrow. "I don't need payment. I didn't help you for that." Suri smiled faintly. "It's not payment. It's an invitation. Kayla's eyes were steady. Come with us, Joran. See the galaxy beyond this. Cold Rock. We have a place for you on our ship, not as crew, but as family. Joran looked past them to the gleaming hull of their vessel. The thought of leaving Redhaven 3 was strange. This had been his home for so long. But something in their words, in the way they stood before him with respect and warmth, stirred something deep inside him. The vibration of the ship's engines hummed through the air, steady and strong, as if waiting for his answer. In that moment, Joran realized something. The galaxy was vast, cold, and full of places where no one cared if you lived or died. But sometimes, just sometimes, a small spark of kindness could burn bright enough to light a path across 10 years and countless stars. He didn't know where their ship would take him, but he knew this. It was time to find out. Joran Vale had never been aboard a ship like this. The ramp under his boots was smooth, polished metal that reflected light like water. As he stepped inside, the air felt different, cleaner, warmer, and carrying a faint scent of something like fresh rain. The sound of the engines was barely there, a soft heartbeat somewhere deep below. Kayla and Suri walked beside him, leading him into a wide corridor lit by gentle white lights. The walls were a mix of silver and soft gold, with thin glowing lines tracing along them in delicate patterns. The floor felt solid, but gave the faintest bounce, as though the ship itself was alive. This is a luxury cruiser? Joran asked, his voice low. Kayla shook her head. No, this is an Alliance deep exploration vessel. Her name is Aurora's Promise. She was built for long journeys into uncharted regions of space. Only a few like her exist. Suri smiled. She's also our home. They entered a large chamber that seemed almost impossible for a ship. It was a living space filled with tall windows showing the horizon of Redhaven 3 outside. There were green plants in neat rows along one wall, soft seating areas, and a small table set with fruit Joran didn't recognize. It was quiet here, but not empty. Every corner felt alive, as if designed for comfort as much as function. A small service drone floated by, stopping for a moment to scan Joran before drifting away. Kayla gestured toward a seat. Sit, please. We have much to tell you. Joran sat slowly, his eyes still moving across every detail of the room. He had worked on ships that rattled, creaked, and smelled of oil. This was something else entirely. Kayla began. After you gave us that meal and shelter, we didn't know what to do. We didn't even know if we would survive the night after leaving your cabin. But luck found us in the form of a research vessel, the Silver Horizon. They took us aboard. When they realized we had nowhere else to go, Suri picked up the story. They didn't just give us food and clothing. They tested us skills, learning speed, memory. We didn't know it, but our minds adapted quickly. We could understand complex systems after only a little study. The crew decided to train us. Kayla's eyes brightened. At first, we worked in small roles, helping in the labs, maintaining equipment, learning navigation. But soon, we were taking on bigger tasks. We were hungry to learn. By the time we were 15, we were assisting with deep space surveys. Suri leaned forward. And always, we remembered you. The night you helped us was the first time in years someone had been kind to us for no reason. That night changed something inside us. We wanted to prove that your kindness wasn't wasted. Joran listened in silence. Part of him found it hard to believe that two girls from the cold alleys of Redhaven 3 had become officers on a ship like this. But the way they spoke, the confidence in their voices, it wasn't a story for show. It was truth. Kayla touched the case Suri had been carrying earlier. That coin you kept, it was part of a set carried by Silver Horizon crew members. Each one holds a unique pattern, encrypted with identity data. We left it with you as thanks, but also, maybe a small hope that you might remember us. We didn't know then how much it would matter. Suri smiled. When we joined the Alliance Exploration Command, we learned how to use the identity network. We traced the signal from your coin. It wasn't easy, it took years, but eventually, it led us back here. Joran glanced at them both. You crossed the galaxy to find an old mechanic. Why? Kayla's gaze was steady. Because people like you are the reason the Alliance exists. We can build ships that cross star systems in hours, map worlds no one has ever seen, and design machines that can think for themselves. But all of that means nothing without the human spirit. That drives it. You saw to strangers in the cold, and gave them warmth, expecting nothing in return. That is what makes humans special. That's what we wanted to honor. Jorn felt a strange heaviness in his chest, not sadness, but something close. No one had ever spoken to him like that before. So he stood and walked to the wide windows, looking out at the dusty outpost beyond. Jorn, you spent years fixing things, machines, tools, whatever came your way. But there's something you didn't know. You also fixed us. You took to broken lives and gave them a chance to start again, Kayla added. We can't repay that in credits or gifts, but we can give you what you gave us, a new beginning. Jorn looked out the window with her. The red dust of Redhaven 3 stretched to the horizon, the mining towers barely visible in the haze. He had called this place home for so long, but now it felt small, too small compared to the ship he was standing in. They gave him a tour of the Aurora's Promise. He saw the bridge, a wide, curved room filled with smooth consoles and glowing displays. The captain's chair was empty, but the other stations were alive with soft lights. From here, the ship could navigate deep into space, scan planets, and even communicate across thousands of light years. He saw the engine core, a tall, glowing column that pulsed with soft blue light. It was nothing like the noisy, oil-stained engines he had worked on all his life. This was clean, efficient, and powerful enough to cross half the galaxy without stopping. He saw the crew quarters, the research labs, and the observation deck, a place where you could stand surrounded by glass and see the stars as if you were floating among them. Every part of the ship was built not only for purpose, but for beauty. It was a vessel meant for explorers, thinkers, and dreamers. When the tour ended, they returned to the living space. Suri spoke first. We leave tomorrow. Our next mission will take us far beyond Alliance borders, to places no human has ever been. We want you to come with us. Jorn was quiet for a long moment. Why me? I'm not young. I'm not trained for exploration. Kayla smiled. You've been exploring your whole life, Jorn. You've just been doing it on a smaller scale. You fix what's broken. You adapt to what's in front of you, out there. We need people like you, people who see the value in life, no matter how small. Jorn looked around the room once more. The hum of the ship seemed to call to him, the same way the stars had when he was younger. He thought about the long years alone in his cabin, the endless work on old machines, and the quiet nights wondering what became of two orphan girls. Now they were here, and they were offering him something he had never dared to imagine. That night, back in his cabin, Jorn sat at his workbench. The silver coin lay in his hand, glowing softly under the lamplight. He thought about what Kayla had said about the human spirit, about kindness that carried across years. When the morning came, the people of Redhaven 3 would see something they had never seen before. Not just the departure of the most beautiful ship to ever land here, but Jorn Vale walking up its ramp, ready to leave his small world behind. And for the first time in many years, Jorn felt something he thought he had lost: hope. The morning was quiet on Redhaven 3. Thin light from the pale sun spread across the frozen ground, making the red dust sparkle like tiny pieces of glass. In the distance, the great shape of the Aurora's Promise rested on the open plain, its white hull bright against the dull horizon. Inside his small cabin, Jorn Vale was packing. It did not take long. He owned very little. A few clothes, some tools he had carried for decades, and one old mug that had traveled with him from ship to ship in his younger years. The last thing he took was the silver coin. It had sat on his shelf for 10 years. Now it went into the inside pocket of his coat. He looked around the cabin one last time. The heater hummed softly, the workbench was neat, and the shelves were half empty. It had been a good home, but it was time to leave Dot as Jorn stepped outside. The cold air bit at his face. A few of the outpost residents were already gathered, their breath visible in the chill. Word had spread quickly. Everyone knew he was leaving. Merrick, the supply clerk, waved from the crowd. You're really going, old man? He called. Jorn smiled faintly. Looks like it. Guess we'll have to fix our own machines now, Merrick said with a half grin. There was no anger in his voice, only respect. Some miners shook Jordan's hand as he passed, others simply nodded, the way people did when words weren't enough. Most of them didn't understand why a man would leave the safety of the outpost for the unknown. But a few, those who had once dreamed of the stars, looked at him with quiet envy. The ramp of the Aurora's promise lowered as Jordan approached. Kayla and Suri stood waiting at the top, their uniforms crisp in the cold wind. They smiled as he climbed the ramp, his boots echoing softly against the metal. Ready? Suri asked. As I'll ever be, Jordan replied. The ramp lifted, sealing away the sight of Red Haven 3. Inside, the air was warm and clean. The gentle hum of the ship surrounded him, a sound both strange and familiar. Kayla led him to a small but comfortable cabin prepared for him. It had a bed, a desk, and a window that looked out into the sky. Jordan set his small bag down and placed the silver coin on the desk. You'll have time to settle in. Kayla said, We launch in 20 minutes. When she left, Jordan sat by the window, watching the horizon. The mining towers stood like dark teeth against the dusty air. He had spent years repairing those machines, keeping them alive in the harsh environment. Now, someone else would take his place. The announcement came over the ship's soft speakers. All crew, prepare for departure. Secure all stations. Jordan made his way to the observation deck. It was already filled with crew members, some at work, others simply watching. Kayla and Suri stood near the front, their eyes on the view beyond. The engines deepened their hum, and the ground outside began to shrink. The outpost became smaller, the towers turning to tiny dots in a sea of red dust. Clouds passed beneath the ship, their edges glowing in the pale sunlight. For the first time in decades, Jordan felt the pull of ascent, the smooth, powerful climb away from a planet's surface. He had forgotten how it felt. It was like rising above all the weight of the world. Then, with a soft shift in the air, they broke free of the atmosphere. The stars came into view, countless points of light scattered across the endless black. Here, away from the dust and cold skies of Red Haven 3, they burned bright and clear. Jordan stood in silence. Even after all the years, the sight still made his chest tighten. Suri stepped beside him. It's different when you see them like this, isn't it? Yes, Jordan said softly. They don't just look like lights anymore. They look alive. Kayla turned to him. Those stars are where we're going. Worlds no human has ever walked on. Places no ship has ever mapped. And we want you with us for every step. Hours later, the ship was ready for its jump to faster-than-light travel. Jordan was invited to the bridge for the moment. He stood near the captain's chair, watching as the crew prepared the jump coordinates. The silver coin was in his hand. He turned it over, tracing the tiny patterns with his thumb. It seemed almost fitting that the same token he had been given in a moment of kindness would now be in his pocket as he left for the stars. Jump drive ready, a crew member announced. Engage, Kayla said. The stars outside the windows stretched into long, shimmering lines. A soft wave of light passed through the bridge, and suddenly, space itself seemed to fold away. They were no longer above Red Haven 3. They were moving through the galaxy at a speed the human mind could barely imagine. Jordan looked around at the crew. They were young, skilled, and focused. Yet there was a spark in their eyes, a mix of curiosity and determination. He realized that spark was the same thing Kayla and Suri had carried since the day they walked out of his cabin, the human spirit, the will to go further, to explore, to survive. The thing that made a single act of kindness ripple outward across years and light years. In the days that followed, Jordan began to learn the ship's systems. He wasn't an official crew member, but he found ways to help repairing a small navigation scanner, improving a maintenance drone's efficiency, and teaching younger engineers simple tricks he had learned over decades. Suri often joined him in the workshop, asking questions about his old life. Kayla sometimes called him to the bridge to watch planetary scans or help judge if an old signal might mean something valuable. They treated him as more than a guest. They treated him as family. One evening, while the ship sailed through quiet space, Kayla brought him a sealed box. Inside was a finely made tool set precision instruments. New and shining. Consider it your new workbench, she said. You're part of this crew now. Joran, you'll need the right tools for the journey. Joran touched the tools gently. I don't know if I can give back as much as you think I can. He said. Suri smiled. You already have. You gave. US our start. Now we get to give you yours. That night, Joran stood alone at the observation deck. The stars stretched endlessly before him, and he felt the quiet hum of the auroras promised beneath his feet. 10 years ago, he had given to cold, hungry girls a warm meal and a place to rest. He had thought it was nothing more than a small kindness in a hard world. Now, he understood that even the smallest kindness can travel far across years, across worlds, and back again. And somewhere deep inside, Joran knew this was only the beginning of his next great adventure.